Before we dive into today's mystery, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It helps us keep uncovering the unknown. Now, let's begin. It was a bitterly cold night in Anchorage, Alaska, on February 1st, 2012. Samantha Koenig, an 18-year-old barista, was finishing her shift at Common Grounds, a small roadside coffee stand. She had dreams, planned for the future, a boyfriend who loved her, and a life ahead of her. But in the darkness, someone was watching. Security footage captured the moment it happened. A man approached the stand, dressed in dark clothing, wearing a ski mask. Samantha greeted him like any other customer, thinking he was just another late-night coffee drinker. But as she prepared the order, she saw something that made her stiffen. A gun pointed directly at her. Her expression changed from polite to terrified. The man gestured for her to turn off the lights inside the kiosk. Her hands trembled as she obeyed. But this wasn't just a robbery. He didn't want money. He wanted her. What the cameras didn't capture was the whispered threats, the cold, calculated instructions he gave her. If you run, I'll kill you. If you scream, I'll kill you. Do exactly as I say. Then, in the final moments of the footage, the man jumped over the counter. Samantha was gone. When Samantha didn't return home that night, her father, James Koenig, knew something was wrong. She was responsible, always checking in. His calls went straight to voicemail. His panic grew as the hours passed. The next morning, he reported her missing. Anchorage police initially assumed she had run away, a frustrating but common response to young adult disappearances. But James knew better. Samantha wasn't the type to just vanish. Then, the police reviewed the surveillance footage. What they saw chilled them to the core. This wasn't a runaway. This was an abduction. A full-scale search began, but there were no leads, no clues, no suspect. Whoever had taken Samantha had disappeared without a trace. Days turned into weeks. The Koenig family waited in agony, hoping for a sign, a call, a ransom demand, anything. Then weeks later, they got exactly that. On February 24th, 2012, a strange message arrived. It contained instructions and a demand. $30,000 for Samantha's safe return. Her family held on to hope. She was still alive. Then came the most haunting part. The kidnapper sent a photograph of Samantha holding a newspaper dated February 13th. Proof of life. She looked exhausted, but alive. Her eyes slightly open, her body limp but posed. Her father immediately scrambled to gather the money. He didn't care about the cost. He just wanted his daughter back. The money was deposited into Samantha's account as instructed. And then, the ATM withdrawals began. The first withdrawal was in Anchorage, Alaska. Then, the next one, thousands of miles away in Arizona. Then in New Mexico. Then, Texas. Someone was traveling across the country, using Samantha's debit card at various ATMs. But there was a problem. The cameras at these ATMs captured only blurry images of a man wearing a disguise. A hood, a mask, glasses. He knew exactly how to avoid detection. But he made one critical mistake. At an ATM in Shepherd, Texas, security footage captured a glimpse of his vehicle, a white Ford Focus. Authorities immediately issued an alert. On March 13th, 2012, police spotted the car. They pulled it over. The driver inside was Israel Keys. What they found inside his car would expose a nightmare. Inside Keys' car, investigators discovered Samantha's debit card, her cell phone, and a gun. It was enough evidence to take him into custody. But no one realized they had just arrested one of the most terrifying serial killers in modern history. Under questioning, Keys was calm. Too calm. He smirked, joked, and toyed with investigators. Then, after hours of interrogation, he finally spoke. "I'll tell you what you want to know. But first, I need a cigar." What followed was one of the most chilling confessions in history. Samantha Koenig? She had been dead the entire time. Keys admitted that he had killed Samantha the very next day after kidnapping her. Everything after that, the ransom demand, the newspaper photo, had been staged. In one of the most disturbing details, he stitched her eyes open and posed her body to make her appear alive for the ransom photo. Then, he did something even more grotesque. He dismembered her body and dumped her remains into a frozen lake. For weeks, Samantha's family believed she had a chance. But in reality, she had been gone from the very beginning. And this was just one of Keyes' murders. Epilogue, the unfinished horror. As investigators dug deeper, they realized Israel Keyes was not just a kidnapper. He was a serial killer who had been operating for over a decade. His methods? Terrifyingly unique. He traveled across the country to kill, avoiding detection. He had kill kits, buried caches of guns, cash, and tools across multiple states, waiting years before using them. He picked his victims at random, ensuring there was no pattern. He killed at least 11 people, but the true number is likely much higher. When asked for details on his other murders, Keyes refused. He enjoyed the power of knowing something no one else did. But then, in December 2012, before he could stand trial, he killed himself in his jail cell. He left behind cryptic notes, but no full confession. To this day, the FBI continues to search for his victims. Many families may never know what happened to their loved ones. Israel Keyes remains one of the most terrifying serial killers in American history. A man who could have been in any town at any time, hunting his next victim. In the interrogation room, Israel Keyes sat calm, smirking, toying with investigators as they pressed him for details. At first, he refused to talk about anything beyond Samantha Koenig's murder. But something changed when the FBI mentioned the death penalty. Keyes didn't fear death, but he feared losing control. He had spent years staying under the radar, manipulating the system, and playing his own twisted game. If he was going to die, it would be on his own terms. So he started talking, and what he revealed sent shockwaves through law enforcement. "I've been doing this a long time," Keyes admitted, leaning back. Long before Samantha, the room went silent. "How long?" an agent asked. Keyes smirked. "Over a decade." Israel Keyes did not kill impulsively. He was a planner, a methodical predator who left nothing to chance. Across the country, he had buried kill kits, plastic buckets filled with guns, ammunition, cash, duct tape, rope, and disposal tools. And the most terrifying part? He left these kits years before ever committing the murders. A kit might sit buried in the woods for 2, 3, even 5 years before he returned to use it. He would fly to a different state, rent a car, and drive thousands of miles, avoiding patterns that might link him to a crime scene. He never killed near his home in Alaska, ensuring investigators wouldn't look in his direction. Keyes wasn't just a murderer. He was a ghost, always 10 steps ahead of the law. But there was one case he admitted to in detail: the murders of Bill and Lorraine Currier. In June 2011, a full year before Samantha Koenig's murder, Keyes flew from Alaska to Chicago. From there, he rented a car and drove over 1,000 miles to Vermont, where one of his kill kits was waiting. He didn't know who he would kill. He just knew it was time to hunt. On the night of June 8th, Keyes wandered through a quiet residential neighborhood in Essex, Vermont. He was looking for an easy target, a home with no dogs, no children, and a simple escape route. That's when he spotted the Currier house. Bill and Lorraine Currier were an ordinary middle-aged couple, living a peaceful life. They had no idea that, at that very moment, a predator was watching them from the darkness. Keyes cut the phone lines before breaking into their home. With a gun in hand, he rushed into their bedroom. They barely had time to react. Lorraine screamed. Bill tried to fight back. But Keyes had done this before. Within minutes, both were bound and dragged into their own car. He drove them to an abandoned farmhouse, where the real nightmare began. Bill was shot execution style, his body discarded like trash. Lorraine suffered a more brutal fate, enduring hours of torment before Keyes finally strangled her to death. He left their bodies in the farmhouse and vanished. By the time police discovered the crime scene, Keyes was already back in Alaska, living his normal life, as if nothing had happened. To the world, the Keyes had simply disappeared without a trace. Israel Keyes operated under one rule: never kill close to home. He avoided victims in Alaska for years, knowing it would bring attention. Instead, he flew across the country, drove thousands of miles, and killed at random. For over a decade, he got away with it. But now, in an interrogation room, his web of secrets was unraveling. Investigators were desperate to know more. How many victims? Where were the bodies? But Keyes enjoyed the power of withholding information. He toyed with the agents, dropping hints without full confessions. They only knew of 3 confirmed murders. Samantha Koenig, 2012, Alaska. Bill and Lorraine Currier, 2011, Vermont. But Keyes admitted to at least 11 murders, and FBI agents suspected the real number could be double or triple that. He spoke in riddles, hinting at victims buried in lakes, bodies burned beyond recognition, murders in states where no one was even looking. Investigators tried everything, offering plea deals, protection from the death penalty, anything to get the truth. But then, before they could learn the full scope of his crimes, Keyes made his final move. On December 2nd, 2012, Israel Keyes was found dead in his jail cell. He had slashed his wrists and strangled himself using a bedsheet. Beside him was a chilling suicide note, a rambling, cryptic message filled with disturbing poetry about death and murder. But there was one thing missing, a confession. Keyes took his secrets to the grave, the names of his victims, the locations of the bodies, the number of murders he truly committed. Inside an FBI interrogation room, Israel Keyes laughed. To him, murder was nothing more than a game, a twisted hobby. I didn't care about gender, age, race, none of that mattered, he admitted, grinning. I just looked for an opportunity. It was one of the most horrifying things investigators had ever heard. Serial killers typically have a victim type, a signature that helps law enforcement track them down. But Keyes? He was completely random. A teenage girl in Alaska, a middle-aged couple in Vermont, unidentified victims buried across the country. The lack of pattern meant no police department had connected his crimes until he was caught. How many others had he killed? That was the question that haunted the FBI. Keyes smirked. Oh, you'll never know. Investigators knew about Samantha Koenig and the Currier couple, but Keyes had been killing since at least 2001, over a decade before his arrest. The FBI tried to break him down. They wanted locations, names, dates. Instead, Keyes toyed with them. I'll tell you about some, he said, but only if you give me the death penalty. It wasn't a confession. It was a negotiation. Keyes wanted control, even in captivity. Over several interrogations, he hinted at murders in Washington, New York, and Texas, bodies hidden in lakes and forests, victims whose families were still waiting for answers. But he refused to give exact details. Investigators realized a horrifying truth. There were missing persons cases all over the country that could be his work. And there was one more chilling fact. He had no intention of stopping. Israel Keyes didn't just think ahead. He planned years in advance. Every murder was premeditated with disturbing precision. He would bury kill kits across different states, cache weapons, supplies. So he wouldn't need to bring anything with him. He would wait years before returning to a location to commit the crime. He would fly to one state, rent a car, then drive thousands of miles, leaving no clear trail. He never used credit cards, only cash, making it nearly impossible to track him. His level of patience and planning made him almost untouchable. If not for one mistake, the ATM withdrawals using Samantha Koenig's debit card, he might still be out there, hunting. Israel Keyes took his own life on December 2nd, 2012. He slashed his wrists and strangled himself in his jail cell. But before he died, he left behind one final clue, a blood-soaked suicide note, filled with cryptic poetry about murder and death. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't an apology. It was a mockery of his victims. The note ended with one chilling message. You may find my body, but never my shadow. You may find what I've done, but never my name. For I am the hunter, and you are the prey. Investigators were left with more questions than answers. How many people did he truly kill? Are there still undiscovered victims buried across America? Did he have an ultimate plan that was never carried out? The world may never know. The case of Israel Keyes is one of the most disturbing in U.S. history. He was the perfect predator. No clear pattern. No emotional connection. No hesitation. To this day, the FBI is still trying to piece together his trail of victims. Some may never be found. Some families may never get closure. And the most terrifying thought? There may be others like him still out there.